Okay, so hello everyone. My name is Felipe Augusto Rangel, and I am the lead of the Google Development STEM Club. And we are here with Antonio Mañueco, who's going to be our guest speaker for today. Antonio is a 2010 U Miami alum. He has plenty of experience in the software industry, over 10 years of experience. And we're very blessed for him to be here with us and to tell him about his experience. And so, without further ado, to Antonio, if you can introduce yourself and all.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you for having me here. Yeah, so software 10 years. Thank you for the compliment. I've been a little bit more than that, but I'll take the
Okay.
compliment anyway.
Really?
Yeah, so background on myself, I started writing software when I was very young, probably when I was 8, 9 years old, so quite some time back. I used to do a lot of stuff for Discovery Kids as a freelancer. So I used to write a lot of Flash. And if anyone kind of remembers, Flash is kind of the animation Adobe tool to like animate frames and do all this stuff on web before Flash got basically destroyed by HTML5 and Canvas. I rode the whole CMS wave. So Joomla, Drupal, WordPress. So I was in PHP, writing PHP for a very long time. Then, I finally graduated. Went to University of Miami. I started off as a computer engineer. After my first semester, I decided not to continue with the curriculum. And before I did something very bad, which was going to business school, my counselor told me I wanted to try industrial engineering. And I ended up doing industrial engineering for 7 years. So I studied industrial engineering, and then I have my master's in logistics, both from UM. During that time, I was a network engineer for the university. So we used to actually be that building called UNGAR, if
Yeah.
nobody's ever heard of it. But yeah, so that was basically headquarters. That's one of the main data centers at So you have one in Pentland Towers, you have one in UNGAR. God, I don't remember the other two, but anyways, 4 data centers redundant from each other. So yeah, so I was a network engineer. So we used to actually do everything for the university from a telco space. Secure canes, if you see that was actually one of my main projects at the university. So I rolled that out campus wide, medical, Erasmus, marine science, etc. So that was one of my main projects at is rolling out authentication and tunneling with wireless networks. Yeah, worked with some amazing people. I mean, like probably the best experience of my life. Met one of my dear friends as well there that I still talk to. He went to Silicon Valley to work with a startup as well. So yeah, it was phenomenal experience. So after I finished my master's, I decided to leave and go 100% entrepreneurial. So I opened up an engineering consulting firm. So we did everything in terms of application stacks, right? So anything that had to do either with networks, application development, infrastructure, DevOps, monitoring, alerting, anything. So I did that for about 15 years. So during those 15 years, I worked with a lot of startups and a lot of enterprises. So Fortune 500 companies, Fortune 100 companies. Very different value props. On the startup side, I would help companies kind of go through the whole MVP. What should you build? How do you know what to build? Get something out, and then they will go out and raise money and go through the whole alphabet of funding. On the enterprise side, it was more about automating processes and really removing friction points from developers. What happens in a lot of companies is that you have developers spending so much time trying to figure out the tooling or trying to figure out how to get these things into production, so they're not you're using development resources accordingly. So I used to come in and actually build automated systems and kind of do training in terms of what a company should be doing. About 3 years ago, I wanted to go beyond consulting. So I kept on seeing a lot of the products that I built for clients would actually go on and be very successful. So I said, well, I keep doing this for all the other companies. Why don't I do this for myself? So I met my co-founder, Roberto. So he had an accelerator out of Silicon Valley with partnered with Google with GSV Labs, which is a Google Startup Ventures leg. So we decided to merge our companies. So after we merged, we started focusing on blockchain and really around tooling around enterprise blockchain. So yes, crypto is part of it, but it's one of the manifestations of blockchain. So we wanted to focus on distributed ledgers, period. So we raised some money. So we raised seed capital. We kicked off the company. And yeah, so after that, we've been 3 years. We actually just closed another round of funding. And outside of that, I've just been consulting. I work with a company called SCI. So we do a lot of consulting for, Fortune 50, Fortune 100 companies on the tech space. So you can see I'm very, very deep into the tech space, all the way from management, like engineering management, all the way to actually writing applications and software, et cetera. So hopefully that consolidates my experience in 5 or 6 minutes.
Yeah, we'll for sure dive into that. And also, we're here with my fellow VP, Nicole, that I also wanted to introduce as well. And so if you want to introduce yourself, Nicole, that'd be great.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nicole. I am a criminal justice major, not necessarily typical for a DSC. Very into tech, so that's why I'm here. And we do have some questions for you, Antonio. Can you tell us a bit about how you actually started your startup? Like what inspired you to do it?
Good question. So I've always been freelancing since I was very young. I mean, by 16, I had my own company. I basically just started an LLC. It's just a way to, yeah, it's a very easy way to just start funneling money in as a company and have business expenses, and only for tax reasons, right? So I've always had something that I wanted to pursue on the side outside of my main job, right? So as a network engineer, as you can imagine, obviously, UM was an amazing experience. Like I said, I learned, we had an amazing team. I mean, it's incredible that 7, 8 people in the telco space managed, 90% of the infrastructure at UM. So I was lucky enough to be with some amazing people there. And then after that, what happened is that a lot of them started leaving UM just for better opportunities. So you kind of grow out of that space. And at that point, I've always been very entrepreneurial, which is why I wanted to go into business, which, like I said, my counselor said, don't think about it. Please just go into industrial engineering. And that was it. I took the plunge. I had some clients that I did some work on the side for, that I said, hey, listen, I'm going to have more availability in terms of time. Are you looking for, actually to ramp up more? And from there, it was word of mouth. It was just one bigger. Obviously, created a whole team of engineers. Never hired a marketing firm. Never hired anything else but engineers. So I wanted to create a culture around just engineering and have an engineering focused firm down here. So the transition wasn't too drastic, just because of that path that I followed, and I had already cemented certain things with clients that would give me my income, right? You always have to have that base, right? Whatever your bills are, you need to pay for them. That's just the reality of it.
Yes, that's excellent. Also, I wanted to put this in the chat. This is a Slido, so anyone can also. This is kind of like a fireside chat, so anyone can chime in as well. You can put into the Slido, so it's like anonymous questions and all that, and we'll definitely cover those questions as much as we can. And so one question I also did want to learn, ask you about is what did you learn when you created Blue Beta? And also what's kind of like, I would say like the most rewarding project you've ever had the pleasure of like working with or solving with?
Ooh, those are very good questions. Okay, so the first one is, what did I learn most, or what was my biggest learning lesson with Blue Beta?
Mm-hmm.
Man, what a loaded question. You don't know shit, basically, and I'm sorry for using that lingo, but you don't know anything. Like at the end of the day, even today, I sit here and I still don't know. Like there's so much world out there, and even when you think like, hey, I'm pretty comfortable in what I know, you just start talking to other people, and that's one of the reasons why I've always loved consulting and having my own companies, because every problem is so different, and the needs and requirements of every client that you work with, or every product that you're trying to build, or the demographic that you're trying to target, or how you want to roll it out, it is so unique that it's just, yeah, you carry experience, which helps you, and there's a baseline that you create that can actually trigger some of the shortcuts at the end of the day. But it's just, I mean, I think you have to stay. It was a very humbling experience sometimes, working with just some companies where you come in and you say, yeah, I know what I'm talking about, and then you're like, absolutely, actually, I don't know what I'm talking about. Managing people, how to raise money is also something that I learned very late in the game in terms of how do you structure the company. So what happens is that a lot of entrepreneurs, we've done some, as I mentioned, right, my partner, he, like I said, he has an accelerator with GSV Lab, or he used to have an attachment with GSV Labs, but we looked at so many startups, advising them just from an advisory capacity. We're talking about hundreds of startups, and I can't tell you how many of them are basically broken because of how they were structured initially. So one of my biggest lessons to this day is always thinking about it from an entrepreneurial perspective, how you actually craft that business right off the bat. I've also seen companies that have amazing products, but because it was 3 friends and the way that they cut out the equity is not really what you should be doing, that they're basically unfundable. Like nobody will look at them because they just don't have the structure, right? So no VC in the right mind or investor is actually going to put money into that. So that was one of my biggest lessons in terms of Blue Beta consulting on the startup side. On the enterprise side is the enterprises always have the most skeletons. They always have these clauses with skeletons and like bad software and bad things. And one of the things that as you continue to grow in your career and you get more experience is that there's always a reason why those skeletons exist. Like never take for granted that somebody just didn't do the right thing. There was always a reason behind why certain things were done. So I would say those two things, number one, like positioning and company building and how to structure a company, and understanding enterprises, like all the stuff that they've been carrying for years, why it's there. And there's always a reason, right? It's never just negligence. Sometimes it is, but very rare. What was the second question?
You want me to go to the market or the? Sorry.
You can talk, no worries.
No, I accidentally unmuted.
Oh, okay, sorry. So I kind of lost my train of thought. But the second question was, what was the most rewarding project? But I was just wondering as well, did you work at all of the Launchpad at UM, or did that not exist yet?
No, the Launchpad actually existed. Never worked with them, so never had a chance to work with them. I think I've talked to a few people years and years ago about maybe helping out with Launchpad, but it never actually, it never materialized into anything. But yeah, it was there when I graduated.
Perfect. And then the other question was, what was the most rewarding project you ever had the pleasure of working on or solving?
Most rewarding project, it's gotta be working with Magic Leap. Working with Magic Leap was an amazing experience.
Do you still work with Magic Leap, or?
No, we did a 6 or 7 month engagement. They obviously under NDA, but I can share at least some of the information. But out of 25 companies globally, they actually selected us to lead this pilot for them, doing some stuff in blockchain, focused on the privacy of a user. So it was probably the most sophisticated piece of software I've ever been involved in. And we actually made it work, and we actually did a POC and presented it to Roni and presented it to all the different people. But I would say that's probably one of the most rewarding. Amazing people, amazing talent, and the fact that we were able to do something that it's thought to be pretty much impossible, that a lot of companies are actually focusing on that. This was now 3 years ago.
Excellent. And also, yeah, there you go, Nicole.
We have another question for you. As a Latino, how have you incorporated your culture in your current workspace? Like Felipe and I are both Latinos.
Yeah, so that's an interesting one. So I've had good and bad experiences, especially in the boardroom with executives. So racism exists. Like that's just the reality of it, right? So I've had very good experiences and I have very bad experiences. Now I've always been one not to shy away from logical sense. So we're also very loud. So my mom is Cuban, my dad is from Spain, from Madrid. So I just have a loud Cuban side. That's just me. It's innate. So I have a loud voice in a boardroom. It manifests itself. Like that's just part of who I am. But I've always treated stakeholders, and I've always treated engineers, and I've always treated people that I work with a specific touch, right? And the touch is a very personal touch, right? I like to know your personal things. I like to know what you like, what you don't, what you dislike. Now, right, wrong, or indifferent, right? Because now we're talking about, we're going through this change as a society, that there's a lot of privacy. You can't say this, you can't say that, right? You have gender fluidity now that's, surfacing in terms of, how do we actually qualify? Not everyone identifies binary, right? You're male or female. There's people that now identify, through gender fluidity, right? So there's a lot of things that are happening right now that you need to be cognizant of, right? So the reason why I say that's just the way that I carry myself is because some people think like, hey, this is business. Like, why do you want to know personally about me? And I respect that. But I've always had just because the way I was raised and because of the Hispanic culture that I grew up in, you always want to develop that repertoire from a personal level. And it's worked out great in my career, but so like, it's not a forced thing. It's just more of I think if you like the people that you work with, or you don't have to like them, but if you find common ground, even with people that you don't necessarily like, the relationship and the product and what you're building is a much better product of what you're looking at, right? So some of the things that I've learned also in terms of life lessons is that you don't have to like everyone that you work with, but if you find common ground, you always have to look out for what the goal or what the company value is, right? And some of the best relationships that I have are people that I don't necessarily identify with from a personal level. I would never, hang out with them. I would never have a beer. I would never have dinner with them, but they've been quite great in terms of professionalism. So I would say, yeah, maybe I flirt with a line of more personal that then translates into work, which I know is very taboo in a lot of places, but that's just me.
And I guess to hop on that as well. So then I guess when you're interviewing someone, what's like the prime thing you look for, I guess, when you're hiring?
Depends what I'm interviewing for. Depends what I'm interviewing for. A technical interview for me is very different than a managerial interview for me, right? So for example, right now we're interviewing GMs for Brazil to basically take over operations in Brazil. We're also looking for technical people in Brazil. So it's very different, the level and kind of what the responsibilities of this person are. I've interviewed probably hundreds and hundreds of candidates across the entire gamut, all the way from juniors to super seniors, to managers, to agile coaches, to marketing people. So yeah, it really depends. If you give me an example, I'll give you what I look in them.
And also, with so much experience as an interviewer, what is some advice for us, young students who are about to enter the workforce?
Okay. Resumes are great as opening the door up, but I don't do the traditional kind of interview stuff. One thing I can tell you is that all the big companies, even when you look at FANG, right, which is Facebook, Apple, Netflix, Google, the gamut, right? When you look at those companies, you may have an awesome resume, but if you don't know anyone that can plug you in, you're not going to get accepted, right? They have algorithms that run, but those specific algorithms are proven to be biased in specific areas, especially with minorities. So what I can tell you is that who you connect with and who you know is infinitely more important than your resume. I have not updated my resume in 15 years, and I was forced to do it because of an investment that we just, as I mentioned earlier. It is the first time in 15 years that I touched it, but I've been able to get into clients. I've been able to interview. I've been able to do all kinds of stuff just because of the people that I know. I have friends that are at Facebook. I have friends that are at Google. I have friends that are in startups in San Francisco. So that is infinitely more important than a resume. A resume just kind of buys you in and says, okay, yeah, listen, I have a resume. I can speak English and I can write it down in a piece of paper, right? At least that's how it works in technology. Now, other industries, I think, it's a little bit of a different style, right? So for example, if I look at an engineer and I look at a resume, I look at what company it was for, what your responsibilities were. That's what I look for. And then I start interviewing in terms of asking you very deep technical questions in terms of every position. Every position in terms of what is relative, right? If you've had 4 companies in 4 years, I say, okay, well, let me drill into these. And then my next question is, why have you had 4 companies in 4 years? We live in an era where there's no such thing as somebody staying in a company 5-10 years. I think those days are gone. I think that's going to be a minority of people, a very, very small subset. So you want to make sure that your resume also makes sense, right? So for example, we interviewed a bunch of people last week for this position in Brazil. And one of the things that I realized was that some of these individuals or some of these candidates were software engineers, lead of software engineering. Then they went to like product management. And then from product management, they went to like a more junior dev role, which tells me like something is not right here, right? Like you always want to create a progression of it. Now, COVID is a different style because, a lot of people lost their jobs. So you have to start from scratch, but you always want to make sure that that narrative is always painted in your resume and you're able to talk through that resume and combine that with who you know that can open up doors for future opportunities.
Speaking of future opportunities, we've kind of seen the news lately, and lately there's been a lot of big tech companies coming to Miami. Like, for example, Microsoft is going to go to Brickell, and Blackstone is also coming to Miami. They're all trying to create headquarters here. What are your thoughts about people putting in their investments in Miami?
Yeah. So Miami has had 3 Silicon Valley explosions that were all marketing jargon. Like that, I've seen this in 15 years. I've seen this at least 3 times. Miami's a new hot epicenter. It's happening now. It's happening now. Now the first 2 were obviously not it, but what happened was that you had areas like Wynwood. Wynwood is a trigger for Miami, right? technology companies aren't going to go to South Beach. That's just the reality, right? But now you start getting areas like Wynwood that, hey, you have the coffee, you have the microbrewery, you start getting that artifact, right? You start creating this culture around entrepreneurship that then bleeds into technology. What's happened this time around is that now it is actually happening. So the money is coming down here. One of the great accelerators was, there was a big exodus from New York in terms of money that came out of there. Now, one of the big accelerators was that New York passed legislation in terms of crypto that did not make it very friendly for marketplaces or crypto companies to succeed in New York. So what do? They moved to Miami. So what happened is that all this money, specifically in crypto, started coming to Miami, which is now, a lot of people are saying Miami is the capital. We're always the capital of something, and it's always marketing, but it's very difficult to say, okay, yeah, we actually are now doing it. But now we're starting to actually do it. And the great thing about, when you have these ecosystems like Silicon Valley or the Bay Area, right, as they develop, like even Austin right now is a development, Atlanta is also a big one, right? You have this ecosystem, which is really culture, money, and talent, right? You have to have those three pillars. You can't have a successful ecosystem or technology innovation center without those three things, right? Miami always had the culture. I mean, we're a melting pot for different ethnicities, and we have all kinds of different people, right? And why is that important? Because your experiences are different. The way that you look at life is different. The way you look at products is different. So you want to have that in a product. You want to have diversity in a product. But what happens? All this diversity over the last 15 years is that it just died. You could not have startup capital here. It was impossible for you to raise money because the investors here were not savvy enough. Sure, you have these angel investment groups, but they weren't as savvy as West Coast investment groups, right? So that also takes time. So now you start injecting money over the last few years. You add COVID as part of the ingredient, and you have this explosion of flavor that now talent is just following. There's been amazing talent in Miami. The problem is that it's always been very siloed. You have very senior people that are this company or that company or that company, but they will never go into the startup world because they have families, they have people to feed. So you can't go into a startup and just say, hey, kids can, we're going to skip a year of school because I want to, embark in this entrepreneurship world. It's not going to work. So now you have this trifecta that has been coming together for the last year and a half. And now you're starting to see a lot of exciting stuff, right? So you have a ton of money, you have the gateway to South America, and you're starting to get talent, and you're starting to get all the talent that left New York, a lot of people out of the Bay Area, a lot of people that are coming to Miami. The weather is phenomenal, but we were missing that talent because we couldn't attract it because we didn't have the money, and we were also a marketing machine. People, if you talk to people like in the Bay Area and Silicon Valley, when you look at Miami, it's like, yeah, it's a fun city to party, but there's no real substance there. Sure, there's some talent, but there's no substance. Now you're starting to get that substance. So that's what's happening right now in Miami.
That was a great talk. We were talking about that actually. But before I ask this other question, for the people that don't understand in the audience, could you explain a bit what blockchain is and what cryptocurrency is?
Sure, absolutely. So blockchain is not a new concept. If you really think about it, if you want to think about it from an abstract perspective, it really is a chain of blocks, right? These blocks contain specific data. In the crypto world, this data means the value of your account. So X wallet has X amount of money, right? Now, so digital currencies have failed since late 90s, I think. They might be earlier, but people have always tried to get digital currencies to get off the ground, and they always failed. Why? Because they could never get the consensus algorithm correct, which is why you always hear about Satoshi Nakamoto. Satoshi Nakamoto is an individual or a group of individuals that created the first real use case of a blockchain that was public, right? And that was Bitcoin, which is why it's the only crypto to today that actually has an identity for storage of value. Now, of course, there's other things that are being built on top of Bitcoin, but it really is a storage of value. And the most important thing that happened in 2010 or 2011, was that he figured out how to actually have consensus and how consensus in a distributed world would actually work. So that's what killed it. Now, it took forever to take off the ground, but then you had 2016 where the ICO craze, and people were trying to exploit that and actually sell securities, which is why a lot of people are in jail, and they will continue to go in jail because the SEC is now going and pursuing all the companies that actually did public offerings without being a registered broker. So essentially, that's what it is. A blockchain allows you to I hate using the marketing terms, but immutability and how they actually talk about immutability of a chain is it gives you that control that nobody can actually change the value of your money, right? So that is always written to what's called a ledger, and that ledger is distributed to all the people that participate this worldwide, right? So essentially for you to lie to the system and try to game the system, you essentially need to have 51% of the computing power in the world, which is sure, technically possible, but it realistically impossible. I try to keep it very kind of high level with a little bit of, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, it's great. Continuing with the topic of crypto, I wanted to ask you, what are your opinions on DAOs and legislation behind DAOs, if you know?
Oh, man, it's a hard one. It's a hard one because technically speaking, you cannot regulate it. You cannot regulate it because it's a distributed system, right? You have the dark web. If you could regulate the dark web, then you can regulate blockchain, but that's the reality. I mean, dark web exists. You can get drugs, you can get all kinds of illegal stuff, and you can't regulate it. It's impossible. Because technically there's always a way to connect, right? Whether it's a VPN, whether it's Tor network, whether it's something, however the hell you want to do it, you could always get around it. So my position on that is that the government really needs to flip. And that's why, again, what's his name? Gensler, the director of the SEC now, he's actually an MIT professor that actually taught blockchain at MIT. One of the things that he's trying to do is take his time in terms of how do we actually want to manage this monster, right? And when you look at it, it's not an easy job. And this is something that when you talk to very like crypto enthusiasts or like Bitcoin enthusiasts, they all think about, well, forget the banking financial sector, everything must die. Bitcoin is the only ruler of the world. Forget everything else exists, right? And that's not really a reality. Banks are still going to exist. They're going to be playing, and they already are playing in the blockchain space. But essentially my point here is that you cannot, because you can't regulate it because of the technical nature of this, what you want to do is that you want to find a way to incentivize people to report their specific earnings, right? That incentivization model is something that the government has never been able to, nor have they needed to do, right? It's the same thing as like Blizzard, right? Blizzard is one of the, well, before the whole thing happened a few years ago, that they had an exodus of talent because of all kinds of allegations, but their whole methodology is like, people are going to cheat, but how do we make people, or how do we incentivize people to do what we want them to do? It's different than we're going to punish you for doing the bad thing. We're going to reward you for doing the right thing, right? And that's what I think a little bit of a methodology here is what needs to happen from a regulatory perspective. And I think that's some of the things that they're trying to think through, because if you try to impose and you say, no, we're actually going to cut off and we're going to cut all the, we're going to try to at least block 70, 80% of people. We can't block it completely, but we're going to block X amount. What happens here is that the US economy is going to get swallowed up by China and all the other countries that are trying to go digital. It's just a matter of time. So there's this spectrum of how much do we regulate it without inhibiting innovation. And that's the part right now that the government, it's not an easy task. It's a very difficult, because it's a spectrum, right? It's not a binary decision of we're going to regulate it yes or no. It's where do we want to land on this spectrum so we can actually protect those that need protecting, right? Because that's what, FDIC insured in banking, that you do protect it for $250,000 is the same concept, but where in the spectrum are you going to land? And what is the mechanism to incentivize people, right? It's a very difficult question.
The reason why I asked is because I'm often on Twitter Spaces and we discuss questions like this. So, for example, we were just going over the idea of implementing some type of legislation that mimics maritime law. So it's a whole separate type of legislation. However, you pay the taxes of the area you live in. So that this money, let's say these taxes, this tax fund, goes to the government in some form, because that would be the way where it merges basically the government and blockchain, since we know the government is already going to get involved with blockchain and has, in a sense. Yeah,
absolutely. It's a matter of sure, you want people to pay taxes. I mean, that's what the government really cares about, taxes.
That's all they care about.
Correct.
Yeah.
So, but it's the same thing that you're seeing in the marijuana business, right? Marijuana largely deals with cash. Why? Because federal, sure, you have it legally, recreationally in a lot of states, but you have banking that still in the federal level, it's illegal. So you're still dealing with cash. So how do you force those people to actually pay taxes, right? Do you want to report it or not report it? So how do you actually now do that with a technology that you could be 100% anonymous? Like I can go, there's mechanisms for me to go and actually buy crypto without ever disclosing my identity. So how do you force me to pay taxes if I really don't want to pay taxes? So
Right.
sure, you want to pay taxes, but how do you force that? That's the part that's very difficult.
Right.
Yeah.
We also wanted to ask what, like, if you want to tell us anyway, what are your ideas about Bitcoin versus Ethereum or any altcoins? What are your thoughts about altcoin season?
Are we looking as an investor or as a technology integrator?
Well, that would be more personal to me. I invest in crypto. So for technology, I look at parachains, like what Polkadot is doing, right? And how they're doing that auction based. I don't think many people in this chat know what that is, but you will soon.
Yeah, so from an investment perspective, I hold a lot of cryptos. Obviously, the stable coins are most of my portfolio, but I do have some, it's a different world kind of thing. Like, so for example, I have a lot of sheep. So, and the reason why I have it is because there's so much power in what happened with GameStop that you don't know what's going to happen. Even like Dogecoin is a meme coin. It was always a meme coin, but because somebody tweeted X amount, like a lot of people made a lot of money, a lot of people lost a ton of money, right? So I have those holdings as well because they're just risky plays, but I'm okay with that risky play. I'm not going to put my entire life savings on it, right? So obviously, and I'm not an investor, so that's just a disclaimer for the recording. But I do hold a lot of different coins. On the altcoin perspective, I hold a lot of coins that either they have a network effect or they're the little brother of somebody. What do I mean by that? So you mentioned a good one, like Polkadot. Polkadot is trying to do integration, right? That's good. That's one. Poly or Matic that they rebranded, that's also an integration, right? So those are projects that are trying to do something from an integration perspective to bring other or really unlock the value of developers, right? Same thing with Solana. Solana is another big one, right? Now Solana has a different take on this, right? Their whole smart contracts are written in Rust. I can probably tell you the amount of Rust developers that I know in one hand. It's a tougher language to onboard, right? It's supposed to be a successor to C++. It's a beautiful language, but where are you going to find those developers that know that enough to really innovate at the pace that they're trying to innovate, right? So it has some technical challenges, but Solana's a great project. Then you have things like Cardano, right? Cardano is a little brother of Ethereum, trying to say, hey, we're also a part of the core team of Ethereum, and we started this coin, and we're going to take our sweet time, and we're going to actually launch this whenever it's ready, and we're going to launch it, but we're going to straight to compete with Ethereum. Now, one of the things that I love about Cardano is that they have software to translate your ERC20 smart contracts into Cardano contracts. That to me is just basically saying we're going to steal your clients and we're going to have a button that's just going to take your smart contracts, right? Obviously, from what they're trying to pitch to technology and fixing bugs and rolling it out is a story, but that's what your high risk, right? High risk, high reward. So Cardano is another big one that I believe in. And then Bitcoin and Ethereum, if you really look at, one of the things that Bitcoin is, like I said, Bitcoin is there's no other coin. Bitcoin is the only one that really identifies itself as, hey, we're a storage of value. That's it. Sure, we're going to do payments or we're going to do all that stuff, but we're a storage of value. We were always a storage of value and we continue to be a storage of value. Ethereum is still trying to figure out what it is. And what do I mean by that? Is like, sure, you have ERC20 contracts, which are fungible tokens, right? Which are like dollars or crypto, like the traditional sense of crypto. But you have this thing of non-fungible tokens, which are NFTs, right? So these are collectibles. These are specific things, right? And right now, the NFT is a big craze. I mean, it's highly speculative, as a lot of these other things are, but they have, it's basically somebody figured out how to sell JPEGs and GIFs on the internet, and now the whole world went ballistic, right? So that's really the reality of what NFTs are. But NFTs also present and open up a whole gateway to something else, which is, well, what about voting rights? What about equity in a company, right? When I buy something through Robinhood, I don't really hold it, right? Robinhood is my broker that holds these things. Well, why shouldn't I hold it if I want to? So that is opening up a whole different world that over the next few years will start changing. So Ethereum is still trying to figure out where in the space is going to be. You also have Ethereum 2 rolling out, which is they're going from a proof of work to a proof of stake. Proof of work is the only algorithm globally that has been tested and it functions. Nobody has done it at that scale for proof of stake. So there's a lot of learning in there, which is why they're taking their time to roll this out, because there's a lot of connotations from going from proof of work to proof of stake. Like it's a psychological factor here, right? Like how is proof of stake actually going to really work? So those are my, altcoins and Bitcoin, Ethereum kind of, and I hold both just because I respect them, and I've written smart contracts, I've deployed smart contracts. So we're not even getting into layer 2 because now we're really going deep into the rabbit hole, but yes.
Yeah, I completely understand. And actually, for people who are newcomers to crypto and blockchain, what would you recommend for newcomers and like kind of like to learn more about it and any specific resources?
There's I gotta find the video, but I think there's a video on YouTube that they do a good job of like, I think the thumbnail is like a blockchain, and then it's got levels of like it's like a toddler, like middle school, high school, college, PhD, like computer science. And they give you a little bit of a different kind of flavor every level. That was a good one just to kind of get a feel for it. The other thing I would tell you is actually like, put some money in a market, open up a Coinbase account, open up something and just buy crypto and just try to move it from one wallet to like another wallet, just like just experiment to it, like just so you know what it is, right? Sometimes it's nerve-wracking because if you've never done it, you're like, whoa, you're telling me if I paste this address and it has to be perfect, then I put it over there, and if I miss one character, then I lose all my money. But once you do it, you're like, oh wait, okay, that's kind of cool, right? So like I've moved large amounts of money even for the business, and it's been in another wallet in like within seconds. I mean, that's unheard of, right? When I have to wire money to like Europe or South America, it could take a week, it could take a week and a half. And for 3 or 4 days of the week, that money disappears from US bank soil. It doesn't appear here and then just magically appears here. Like those systems are completely outdated. And that's what's being replaced right now. XRP is another great project outside of SEC stuff, but yeah, different conversation.
Completely understandable. And also, like, when did you first hear about blockchain and also like crypto in general? Like, I'm guessing like around 2011 or so, like when you just graduated or around then.
Yeah. So I actually mined some Bitcoin, not to like any degree, when it was like 98 cents or like $1 and something cents. I think that was 2010, 2011, like right off the bat. And then somebody that had worked at and this is one of the things that I always hold against him, is that I asked him about it. He's like, no, it's already too late for that stuff.
Too late.
And he's one of the smartest dudes that I know. I mean, I owe a lot of my career to him. But yeah, that's one of my things that I always hold against him.
Sure. And also, I was looking at the Slido. Did you do any internships, freshman year or during college, to be honest?
I did not. Actually, in college, I thought it was like going to be a transition from high school. So I figured that I could always party and then just take tests and I'll be all right. So then what happened was that that did not go well my first year. And then I was like, oh, I actually have to study for this stuff, right? So I had to make up in terms of like GPA and being able to stay and do all that. I had to make up by just like studying my ass off, right? And then the only internship I took was at the university as a network engineer. And then I took a full-time job with him and I was with him for 7 years. So during my master's, I was working at So that was, I never took an internship, even though that is one of my biggest things is that, everyone's life is different. Everyone's ambition is different, but you should definitely take an internship because even if you hate the internship, at least now you know what you hate. So that way you don't make that mistake once you actually graduate. I have a lot of acquaintances that I went to high school with that, they also partied their ass up, but they were not in engineering. So it's a very different lifestyle when you're in engineering or computer science or computer engineering than if you're in business school. I mean, business school is a different story. Not to offend any business school majors, please, by any means. I'm just saying it's a different kind of curriculum. And I have a lot of those acquaintances that through the years, you start hearing that like, yeah, listen, this guy's hating life because he didn't know what he liked. And, you start working somewhere, you start building, some type of net worth, then you get married, you have kids, you hate what you're doing, but now you can't change because it's too late. And that is probably the saddest thing that I can tell you from a professional perspective is bumping into those people that because they never actually gave the time of day to really understand what they liked, what they didn't like, and fail as soon as you can, early on in your careers. Don't make those mistakes later on. Make sure that you get those before you start having responsibilities. You never know when you're going to meet the person you're going to marry. You never know when you're going to have kids. And you want to make sure that you love what you do, because as soon as you have kids, life changes, like different story. So.
Yeah, it's completely understand. I understand. Because I also I did an internship at Amazon this summer, and so it really just opened the doors like into like what I like, what I don't like, and I'm still trying to figure that out for myself. I have a lot of different interests, and so definitely for like future internships. So actually, I'm going to be going back to Amazon next summer, but that's definitely
great.
a piece of advice that I would give to anyone else. Definitely try to see what you like, explore, because exploration is extremely important, especially when it comes to software. It's like it's changing every day, so many different topics, and you gotta eventually pick and choose what you like.
Yeah, absolutely. Congrats on that, by the way. Did you know?
Yeah, thank you so much. It was in Washington D.C., and so it's gonna be back in D.C. and we'll see where it goes. I mean, I'm really open to anything, and so I'm just excited to see what Amazon has to offer.
It'll open up. It'll open up. Obviously, depending on what you're doing and the people you work with and stuff, it'll open up doors as well. Especially in the tech space. You coming from a big company doing writing software. I mean, anyone will hire you like right off the bat.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, at
Yep.
least easier down here, especially Miami. Like I said, is still maturing in terms of like what is what. But you have an Amazon person like interviewing here, like with even like 5-6 years of experience, they'll get picked up at a ridiculous salary like within a week.
Yeah, no, I'm very blessed that happened to me. And really, and to be honest, I'm also a part of this professional organization. I don't know if you heard about it. It's called MLT. And I would recommend any software here, any software that's interested in like computer science or even finance, definitely apply to MLT if you can. They help you with like career development. They give you mentorship, guidance, coaching, and they're sponsored of a bunch of different companies. So if you guys want to join that at all, just be sure to message me. I can send you it. But also, you mentioned about master's degrees. And so this actually falls on one of the Slido questions. Did you do your master's at UM, and why did you choose it at UM and not really any other university? That's definitely something I'm also thinking about, like, where am I going to do my master's, or if I even want to do a master's,
I hope there's not a lot of professors in this Zoom meeting.
I don't think so.
So I'm highly controversial on this topic. And I'm gonna leave it to just technology, just because it's the area that I know best. I think 4-year technology degrees are flawed as an undergrad. And the reason why I say that is because for a fraction of the cost, you can get into, I'm not talking about like the 3-month boot camps. I mean, those are also great for like web development and stuff. But if we're talking about true software engineering practices, you can do boot camps that are year-long that show you like time complexity, algorithms, data structures, and also show you what to actually write that you can do in 1 year instead of 4 years. I think the curriculums and 4-year degrees they're just not structured. It's not something that I would recommend anyone. And the reason why you would go with something like a Stanford, Berkeley, MIT is because of the connections and being close to other people that also, are at that kind of level in terms of software engineering, right? So I don't think they're necessary. And I think universities are actually going to struggle to maintain 4-year technology degrees, given now that, one of my best engineers was somebody that I hired straight out of high school. The guy was brilliant, and I obviously it was a very sensitive topic, but I told him, listen, I know that, he did an internship with us for 2 years. So he was a junior, and then his senior year, he said, hey, I want to work. I don't want to go to college. And I said, listen, that's a decision you want to take. That's you. It's your take. And he's doing very well. He never went to college. He worked with us for 2-3 years. Now he's working with a marketing company that does like AI analytics for the marijuana business. And he does extremely well for himself. He's 21 years old. He's about to buy a house. So those are the things. And of course, this is an outlier. I mean, the guy's brilliant. But when you look at technology and writing software, there are alternatives that are cheaper, especially if you're not on a full-time scholarship. That is just, I just don't see the worth of the money. Obviously, this is outside of, hey, I want to go to 4 years in college because I want to study and I want to party and I want to do this stuff. 100%. That's also part of kind of the envelope. But from a learning perspective, some of the best software engineers that I know and I've worked with, a lot of them didn't go to college. I'll say most of them didn't go to college.
And so does that also apply to master's degrees as well? So if you already went, you already did your undergrad, would you want to do that master's degree, or it's not really too much necessary?
Yeah, so good question. So the only reason why I did my master's degree is because UM paid for it. And I wanted to get a master's. Like it was just something that, I always thought I was going to go in supply chain. And software was just something on the side that I did that I love. But then I just ended up with this logistics master's that, sure, I mean, the way of thinking is great because it really shifts in terms of how you actually look at problems and how you actually position specific things. So any kind of specialization at a master's level, especially on the software space, just helps you to think abstractly. But if you're already thinking abstractly because you did something else earlier on and you've always been developing software, might not be for you. It's never opened up any doors for me. So yeah, it really depends on, what they're giving you, how much do you have to pay? Do you want to be in debt for $130,000 for a master's that you may or may not necessarily need? Now, this is obviously different than, like, for example, if you're a pre-med major, well, you're going to have to extend kind of like your studies, right? There's a lot of, depending what field you're going to go into, that you might need a master's, right? But I'm always a big fan of specialization. Always a big fan. So for example, if you want to go into cryptography, 100% you want to have a master's in computer science, or you want to start looking into that route, right? Because it's a high research area, especially when you talk about like zero knowledge proofs, which is really going to completely change security over the next 10, 15 years. So it really depends. It's got a lot of factors. So I don't have a blanket statement. It's just make sure that you get enough experience. If you're interning and then you want to go through the master's process, great. If you have never interned and you just graduated and you're going straight into master's, I would highly suggest that you start getting an internship. I've worked with a lot of people that have done that, like 6 years, like straight, like 4 years and 2 years of master's and coming into the workforce. And they don't know anything. Like they have no idea how software actually works in the real world. And that is really sad that you spent 6 years and you still have no idea how to write a piece of software that is architected properly for production use. So beware would be my overall.
Yep, I definitely agree with all that, especially with the whole specialization where definitely fields that are very advanced. And so for sure you might want to do that master's. I think if I'm not mistaken, I think Carnegie Mellon for sure has, I think they even have like an undergrad or an AI, and I think they're like the first university with that. And so yeah, I would definitely recommend that as well.
Yeah.
But
you even have Stanford. Stanford has a bunch of courses online for free in iTunes. They have like an iOS developer course. They were the first university to actually publish how to actually do it. Free podcast, like the entire thing. You can become an iOS developer just by signing up to them. So there's a ton of information for software. Like, yeah, ton of information.
Yeah, it's just a matter of just like, finding it, compiling it, and also like preparing us well for interviews, because
it's knowing what's right and what's wrong, which is why you would pay professors, but sometimes you pay people in the professional field to kind of guide you, right? Which is why mentorship and internships are so important. It's because if you know somebody that really knows, they can guide you and actually give you what you really need.
Mm-hmm. Let me just check the Slido one more time. See if there's any other questions. Oh, okay. Someone asked a question. What advice would you give to someone trying to get into cybersecurity?
Oh, another controversial topic that I love talking about. So cybersecurity, okay? Let's have a base here. The best cybersecurity experts on the planet are the people that have gone to jail because the FBI is like, you need to go to jail. Like you broke into some shit and you need to go to jail. Like those are the best cybersecurity people. So, and then you have the whole concept of black hat and white hat and all this stuff, right? So in terms of cybersecurity, you really want to, and I don't advise this to anyone, but you want to basically try to break things, right? You always want to have, you can't go to cybersecurity will give you, like, there's a lot of different courses online that kind of at least give you a framework of like all these different things in cybersecurity, right? There's like pen testing, there's like security infrastructure, network topology stuff that you can have in terms of security and firewall policies and all that. So that'll give you a good base in terms of what people do and what enterprises do at the infrastructure level and then at the application level. If you want to be super hardcore, that's a very different path than understanding from an infrastructure layer where in the stack you want to land. I'll give you another example, like the high school kid that I hired straight from high school. So one time, so he did two things with us that, I my hat off to him. So one of them, when NVIDIA first launched, I think that the product was called NVIDIA Now, which allows you to basically play games and stream games to your laptop, etc. So he figured out how to actually open up a root shell and actually start mining. So he was using NVIDIA servers to start mining, not at a ludicrous, not at like a huge, but I mean, within a week, obviously they shut down his account, but he figured out how to do that, right? The other thing that he found out was that Papa John's had this bug where if you were able to order this pizza, you would put all the toppings and you would add that first and then add like a medium or a large, and then you would go and edit the first one. Your price, like we had receipts, and I still have pictures of them, where we would order for like when we used to host like mentor sessions, or we used to have like specific workshops, we would order 10, 12 massive Papa John pies, and the bill would be like $7.98. So he also figured that out, right? So you always want to play with the software. You always want to, try to break it. If you're interested, like Google, Microsoft, all these companies, they also have bug bounty programs where if you find a bug or an exploit and you let them know about it, they actually pay you for it, right? So those are like the really good security guys that understand how to actually exploit software. Obviously, one of the things that, and I do respect this, I think a lot of the best hackers that do that, they give the company time and they say, hey, I found this out. I'm telling you right now, but if you don't fix this within 30 days, I'm going to actually go in the wild and let everyone know that this is a bug that you have. Some are more important than other ones, especially in cybersecurity. You had Heartbleed, which was an OpenSSL issue that happened a few years ago. And I don't know if you guys remember, but it broke the internet because essentially there was a major hole for SSL certificates. So those are the ones that you want to tread very, I mean, if you bump into one of those and you figured that out, your career will just go in a rocket, and then good luck with, wherever you land, like, listen, best wishes. So it really depends on where the spectrum of cybersecurity you want to land. Cybersecurity also in enterprises, just so you know, as to wrap up the cybersecurity point, is that there's a lot of enterprises that the cybersecurity team is somebody at a desktop that basically hits a button. You put the IP address of a server, you hit a button, and then it gives you a report that says, hey, this box is listening on port, blah, blah, blah. It's listening on an unencrypted port. It's doing this, it's doing that. Like, I would say you probably want to stay away from that because your job is going to be on the line, 5-10 years. All of this is being automated. So you want to be the thinker that knows how to actually, do things from a security posture.
Excellent. Whoever asked that question, great question. And also just on my own, I was just also interested. So you were mentioning earlier that like very important when it comes to startups, is a structure and all that. And so if I had like an idea, ideas, they come and go as they wish, but like what's like some steps I should take to like pursue the idea and all that? Like what would be some like guidelines you would say for startups and all that for anyone really new in as well?
Entrepreneurship. Ideas are very cheap. Everyone can have ideas, and every time. So we used to have a policy when I ran my company that we used to not sign NDAs. If somebody told me that they had an idea and they made me sign an NDA for an idea, I just would say I just don't sign NDAs for ideas. At the end of the day, the execution and the amount of effort that goes behind actually executing an idea, building it, taking it to the market, getting users, iterating, and exiting, it is a monumental effort, right? So let's start with ideas, right? Ideas, you never know. I'm a very open with ideas. Every time I have an idea, I always talk about it. Doesn't matter how cutting edge I believe the idea is and how retrograde the idea is. Doesn't matter to me. But that's just also a methodology, also technology that you should just be open, collaboration. I mean, the world's most powerful software is all open source software. I mean, that's just the reality of it. Now, in terms of structure and how to build it, one of the reasons, and this goes back into my personal kind of path as an entrepreneur, one of the things that one of my friends at made me question, the buddy of mine that told me not to mine Bitcoin because it was too late, but one of the smartest guys that I know, one of the things that he told me that, we had a conversation once about, me wanting to, I had this grandiose idea of like owning a company and having all these employees and being a CEO. And man, was I wrong. I do not, and nor do I in this point want to do that. And one of the things that came out of that conversation was like, listen, do you ever want to depend on somebody else to build an idea that you have? And I was like, absolutely not. I want to be able to do it. And he said, well, listen, then you got to spend the next 10 years writing software. And I can't tell you, after I've been now writing software for so long from a production and enterprise quality, is that I don't need to depend on anyone. I can go into a team, I can work with the engineers, I can go with product managers. So when I have an idea, I'm like, oh, I can build this. This is how I would build it. These are the tools that I would use, and I would just build it. If you want to go down that path and you're an entrepreneur, I would 100% tell you, you either have a very good network that will fund that and say, hey, here's 100,000, here's 150,000, go and actually get this built. And then figuring out who to build it is another whole different problem, because I can't tell you how many clients I had over the years that said, oh, listen, I spent 50,000 on some outsourcing company and now I have no product. Can you please help me? Right. So anyways, but outside of that, it really comes down to that. Everything is technology. So do you want to build it, or do you have a company and the funding to be able to build that? And that's a very clean, that is a black and white decision. Do you want to depend on anyone to take that company somewhere, or do you not want to because you want to build it yourself, right? So that's something that you always want to think about from a product, taking a product from concept to building it out.
Excellent, excellent. Oh, our time's about to expire kind of soon, like a couple minutes. So if anyone has like any questions or would like to chat as well, you can come off mute or, drop a question in the Slido. I put it in again. But yeah, this has been great so far.
These are softball questions. What are the really hard ones?
Well, Nicole, do you have any questions you want like that? Or you can go.
Hi, Antonio. Awesome talk. So I have a question about, so on the intro, it's saying that you have expertise in IoT. So you're working with both software and hardware, right? Can you talk a little bit about the hardware side? How do you how you work with the hardware engineer and stuff like that?
Yeah, so good question. I've been removed from that for a little bit of time now. Where I have worked with IoTs and telemetry data, right? So I've worked with a lot of devices that generate all this data. What do you do with this data to actually save it? Now, as a hobbyist, I love mechanical keyboards, so I actually build mechanical boards. That's just something that I do. I love my Raspberry Pi in terms of building out different things and robotics and stuff like that. But that's more on a hobby perspective, not on a professional perspective, right? Like, yeah, I can't tell you the last project that I did in terms of hardware. Actually, it was a few years ago, and it was not building the hardware, but it was interfacing with hardware. So it was a company that was doing smart home automation. So actually plugging into a lot of the actual like Z-Wave and Zigbee and all the actual mesh networks that smart devices are having. Now to actually be able to integrate and actually move and turn off the lights and do all that stuff, like that world I know very well, but the building the hardware is not something that I've done in a long time and not in production. It's been more of a hobby. And I'm happy to drill into anything in that, but I don't know if your question was more on the actual like.
Yeah. My question is more like prototyping, rapid prototyping. So, and interfacing, you mean like programming hardwares?
Yeah, correct. So for example, like on
Raspberry.
So for example, mechanical keyboard is written in C. So I actually write a lot of the firmware for my mechanical keyboard to have key bindings for specific things that I like. So in that world, it's stuff that I really do enjoy, but I do it for fun. Just if you have noticed, like that's an IBM keyboard, and then that's a Ducky Shine, and then this guy is one that I built that has custom firmware written in C.
Oh, that's so cool.
I think so, but I tell my wife, and she's like, "Yeah, sure. You're such a you're such a nerd."
It's not like you go.
Would hardware, like programming hardware, be like as easy as some software? Would you say it's easier, or it's harder?
It's different. It's easier in a lot of ways, and it's harder in a lot of ways. So, for example, when you write a front-end application on the web, it is very, very frustrating, especially if you're not a front-end engineer. Why? Because the styles look different in every single browser, in every resolution, in every operating system. So you're always tweaking the same thing to make it look the same in 50 different things, right? So it's there's a little bit of subjectiveness too. It's a little bit of an art and a little bit of a science, right? Now, In terms of hardware, the thing compiles or it does not compile, right? If it compiles and you have an error, sometimes you have a very easy exception that you can say, okay, great, here's the exception. Okay, let me fix it, right? But with that also comes how much is this software or this the hardware piece documented that you can actually look at the errors or talk to the author of it to know how to actually fix a specific error, right? So it depends what hardware you're trying to write in and the type of documentation is offered to you.
Yeah. Okay, so one last question. So do you think Miami would be a great place for a, doing a hardware project? I know they've got the crypto thing, all the software thing going on. What about hardware? But
I think so.
Yeah, you think?
I think so. So fun story here. A few years ago, I actually hired. So there's a really good friend of mine. His name was Lou Chuntao, and he was doing his PhD in physics, and he was trying to build a hardware device that would be able to determine when a tsunami or a change of wave direction would be in the middle of the ocean. I mean, when you think about this, it's like, wow, okay. So anyways, so he did an internship with us. And then after he did software, he actually said, like, I actually want to do software. I don't want to do hardware anymore. But it was something that was actually being invested on. I think there was an investor somewhere with ties to Miami, right? So anyways, he ended up at Uber writing live integrations for Google for Maps. So he was actually one of the engineers of their live team, right? Amazing, also incredibly talented person, and he was always meant to be there. But anyways, my point with that is that what he was building, I think there was money being poured in to that device from a company that was interested in actually being able to pilot that and being able to actually flush that out. So I think there is money for hardware here, especially now when you're talking about like digital wallets and hardware wallets to mimic those digital wallets. You have a lot of cool things that are going to start kind of popping up here. So I think Miami's a great space to start a hardware company.
Okay, thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much for the questions. And just like, since we are kind of wrapping up, I was just wondering if you have like any, more advice or thoughts, to impart onto us since we're about to leave pretty much. Or wrap up.
Yeah, I mean, this one I think has become cliche over the years, but fail. Like experience is all about failing. That's it. Like one of the things there's a motivational speaker. His name is Tom Peters, and one of his talks is still phenomenal. I watch it at least once or twice a year. It's already maybe 10, 15 years old, and it's still relevant today. And one of the things that he said is like, listen, when I hire, I don't want the 4.0 GPA student. Give me the person that have C's and D's, because that's the person that made all the mistakes before. That A student that has never made a mistake before, that person does not know how to handle failure. So my point is, you want to fail quickly, and that's what gives you the gray hairs. It's actually being able to fail quickly, pick up and iterate. Like that is the world that we're in right now. Software, the best software is always built like that. You want to build something, launch it in 3 months, make sure what works, what doesn't work, be able to, hit the ground running, right? So make sure you fail quickly. Make sure you surround yourself with people that are smarter than yourself. Never be the smartest person in the room. It's just a terrible thing to do. And yeah, get internships, like try out, like you never know, like people will always take interns and people will always take stuff. Just make sure that the people that you work with, that you are gonna get something out of it. Those are kind of the 3 big things that I could tell you. Just experiment.
I completely agree with those as well. Definitely experiment, definitely explore as much as you can, learn as much as you can. It's definitely very important. For sure, before you guys leave, please fill out the form just to get an overall idea of what you guys thought of this event. But otherwise, thank you so much, Antonio, and thank you for coming by, and hopefully we could have done this in person, one day, but with all the guidance and all that stuff, it's kind of difficult. But thank you so much.
We'll do a round 2 and we'll get really into crypto, which is I know that Nicole really wanted to get into. So
yeah, Nicole is all fascinated with that. So it's for sure fun.
Yeah. Well, anyways, guys, thank you so much for having me. It's been great. Some great questions. And yeah, Felipe, listen, we'll be in touch. Let me know if I can help with anything else.
Oh, thank you so much. But yeah.
All right, everyone. Have a great night.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.